Hi, hello everyone. I am Dr. Rajiv Sutradhar. I work with Department of Economics, Northeastern Hill University, Shillong campus. Today I am going to talk about foreign trade multiplier, how this concept emerges, and then the meaning of the foreign trade multiplier and what are the policy implications, right? So to begin with, foreign trade multiplier as a concept can be traced all the way back to in fact even before the Keynesian multiplier. It can be traced back to Roy Herod, who presented it in his 1930 book International Economics. And they actually, if you look at what exactly this foreign trade multiplier means, it has its actually roots that can be traced back to the mercantilist ideas. Okay, if you guys recall what exactly the mercantilist idea is, basically mercantilist idea emphasizes on having more export than import. To earn more gold reserves. Basically, the idea that export is good compared to other things is the key idea here, and which can be also seen as we move along. Okay, and this idea can be it was there in the mercantilist idea that this export is very critical for a nation's economy, but then it is formally adopted by Roy Herald in his concept of foreign multiplier. And what it exactly means, foreign trade multiplier exactly means that if an economy manages to increase its export, then effect on the domestic economy is far more than the exact magnitude of export. Basically, it works through a multiplying mode. Because once you have some forex earning through export, then it gives money to some people, and then they spend. Then there's a basically virtuous cycle, which basically leads to a ripple effect on the economy. So this sounds very similar to something that you guys have read during the undergraduate syllabus on Keynesian multiplier, right? What does Keynesian multiplier explain? It says that if government spends a certain amount of money, then it gives some money to the or cash to the people's hand. Then they spend, and then it gets basically another. Then once it spends, then some people, other set of people basically receive those money, and then they spend. So it basically keeps going on. In a virtuous cycle. And foreign trade multiplier exactly also kind of involves similar concept, except that this is a concept that is applicable for a framework of open economy macroeconomics. So it basically extends the Keynesian multiplier concept to include international trade. Okay, but then whenever we discuss certain concept, this concept always has certain assumptions. Okay, to simplify, basically the role of the assumption is to simplify the setting, and in which basically we can then focus narrowly on the concept that we are going to discuss. But of course, this if there are too many assumptions and these assumptions are very strong, then that means this model has become an abstract idea, and then probably it cannot be immediately applied. But then, so we'll just look at what are the assumptions that is required, okay, to discuss or to narrowly focus on the foreign trade multiplier. And the first thing is there is full employment in the domestic economy, and then there is a direct link between domestic and foreign country in exporting and importing goods. Then the country that is we're discussing is a very small country with no foreign repercussion effect. And then this country actually adopts a fixed exchange rate system. Okay, it's not a flexible exchange rate. Then multiplier is based on the instantaneous process without time lag. So that means if there is an export earning, so then there is the ripple effect that we are going to discuss doesn't involve any time lag. Okay, and then there is no accelerator process involved here. And then of course there might be some non-tariff barrier that is always there, but then we assume away the presence of non-tariff barriers and exchange control. And then there is no domestic investment. Okay, it is constant, and so is the government expenditure. Basically, we are kind of nullifying the effect of fiscal and monetary policy that may be undertaken by the government. Okay, and also this is a two-country model. So these are the assumptions which are required to basically simplify the settings in which we can discuss this foreign trade multiplier. But then, as we move along, we gradually relax one or two assumptions to see actually what happens. Okay, whether we can see the foreign multiplier effect in operations, or if it is it the same. So that is something that we are going to discuss in the subsequent unit. But now, to begin with, in an open economy, macroeconomy, we have this the equilibrium condition is, and the injection in an economy is exactly equal to the leakages. Okay, so what are the injection? Injection means some infusion into the system. Okay, it is that basically some kind of cash is now entering into the system. Okay, people are getting some income, and what are these? Basically, investment is already there even when in a closed economy. But once we open up, then we have to basically include export. Okay, because once the export comes into picture, that means people get money out of that export earning. Okay, so I plus X are basically is an injection into the system. This is considered as something good for the economy. Okay, and what are the leakages? Leakages is basically, you can say, savings and import. Okay, and why it is leakage? Because basically that means something that is in operation, like through cycle, suddenly that is not there. I mean, if you guys recall what was basically Keynes and multiplier, then they are basically consumption is good thing and saving is not so good thing. Okay, because saving is something, then you are withdrawing something from the system. You are basically, instead of spending that money, you are kind of keeping it with yourself. So saving is kind of a leakage in a virtuous cycle. And now we can basically treat basically import also in a similar way. Okay, because import means whatever money that, just like saving, whatever money you are spending, basically that money is now getting leaked out of the country to another country. Okay, now that money is not going to operate in a like within that economy. So basically, export is something just akin to investment, and import is something which is akin to saving. And we have now total injection, which is investment plus export, equal to saving plus import. Okay, and but then we have now open economy is in equilibrium, then investment is equal to savings and export is equal to import. Okay, but that is not necessarily always required to be true. Basically, we have total injection, investment plus export taken together has to be is equal to saving plus import. So that means saving and investment do not need to be balancing with each others individually, and export and import, they do not need to be balancing with one another. But then taken together, the summation must be equal. Injection and leakages must be equal to each others. So we can explain concept in a better way through this diagram. If you look at this diagram, we are measuring income in the x-axis, right? And we are in the x-axis, or in the y-axis, we are measuring in the both leakages as well as injection. Okay, investment and plus export, and along with that saving and import. Both are the things that we measure along the y-axis. Okay, and if you look at, I mean, we have a saving function sy, which start from -50, and then it keep rising as the income rises. So you may ask, how come it start from negative? Basically, even if we basically, if we look at, even if we do not have any income, still you may have to draw upon from your past savings. Basically, you are saving to basically meet the minimum expenditure. So that's why it starts from -50. That means no income, but then still you draw upon from your past savings. Okay, you are basically doing this saving, and then as your income increases, you keep basically saving more. Okay, that's why saving curve is upward sloping. Okay, and it is basically induced by basically income. Okay, so saving is dependent on income. Okay, and then on top of this saving curve, basically, okay, you have another curve which is I am showing as like now sy plus my, right? It is on top of this saving curve, which is again basically it's an upward sloping curve. That means as your income increases, your saving increases, and along with that, as your income increases, you also tend to basically spend on foreign purchase of foreign goods and services. So your import is also a function of basically income. So sy plus my also is an upward sloping curve. But then as compared to that, if you look at this investment curve, which is basically just lying parallel to y, okay, y parallel to x-axis, or basically you can say it's independent of basically income. Okay, so which is starting from 150, right? And then it is a parallel line. That means this investment is autonomous investment, as Keynes has discussed in his multiplier concept as well. That is, it is not dependent on income. And then on top of that, you have like export, which is export is basically 300. So 150 plus 300 is equal to 450, and this is again parallel. I plus X is again parallel. And why is it parallel? See, the export that we record is basically other countries import, okay? Because other countries importing, only then we can export, right? And other countries import is their function, income function of their income. So basically, whatever export that we record, that is basically independent of our income. Basically, that depends on other countries' income. So that's why, as far as our income is concerned, which we are basically measuring along the x-axis, so export is independent of that income, okay? And that's why it is again in another parallel line imposed on I, okay? So I plus X, okay? And here you see the I plus X is intersecting with saving and input curve at point E, equilibrium point, okay? And then if you see what is the equilibrium income here, so that means here I plus X is equal to SY plus MY. So what is I here? I plus X is injection, and SY plus MY is basically the leakages. They are equal. So that's why it's an equilibrium income, and our equilibrium income is 1000 rupees. Okay. But then if you see here, saving curve is also intersecting with the investment curve at the same equilibrium level. That means here saving is equal to investment and import is equal to export. Okay. So we coincidentally we have an equilibrium income where savings is equal to investment, and then we have balance current account. Okay, there is export and import, they are all equal to each other. Okay, but now just assume that there is an increase in export. That is what basically foreign trade multiplier is indicating. So we have an increase in export by 200. So 450, then you draw another line which is basically now making it 650. Okay, so another parallel line, and it is intersecting the SY plus MY line at E dash, okay, on the top, okay, top right hand corner, okay. And then if you like draw a line which is parallel to y-axis, and you see it is intersecting the x-axis at 1500. That means we have 200 rupees increase in export, and our equilibrium income increased by basically 500, okay. But then now you see here, if you see the match the saving and investment, here saving point is at K, but investment point is at L, and that means, and they are not same. So basically we have more saving than investment, okay. And that is basically, so that means we have a saving being more than basically you can say investment, and so import is less than export, okay. So that means we have a current account surplus in this equilibrium point. We have a current account surplus, okay. So we will now move along to show this in an equation form. So basically, if you see the equation 1, here basically, if we move from one equilibrium to the another equilibrium, so then we need to have change in investment plus change in export has to be equal to change in saving plus change in input, okay. That means induced changes in saving and saving and imports when income changes are given by, basically you can say change in savings. So how does change in savings happen? So when there is a change in income, so then you have to basically marginal propensity to saving into that change in income is basically what you get as a change in savings. And similarly, change in input is basically nothing but marginal propensity to import. That means once, say 100 rupee increases, how much of that money is going to be spent on buying imported goods, okay. So that MPM into change in income, okay. And change in saving is basically how much out of 100 rupees, how much generally you do save aside, okay, into that total change in income. So that is basically change in saving. So this change in saving and change in input, you can plug in equation 1, and then what you get is change in investment plus change in export is equal to this MPS into del Y plus MPM into del Y, okay. So you can just del y is both common in the right hand side expression. You take it out, and then what we have is del I plus del X, change in investment plus change in export. Basically this is nothing but total injection is equal to MPS plus MPN into del Y. Basically, right hand side is nothing but total leakages. Okay, but then we can just play around those equations, and then what we find is that change. Basically, what is the multiplier? Multiplier is nothing but generally something that how much finally total income changes due to change in this autonomous component. Okay, so our interest is to basically figure out what is the total change in income, and that's why we are taking it to the left hand side and all other expression to the right hand side. So del Y is equal to 1 by MPS plus MPM into del Y is del I plus del X. So basically MPS basically 1 by MPS plus MPM. These are both MPS and MPM, if you guys recall, are both leakages. So 1 by leakages into total leakages into the changes in the autonomous component del I plus del X. Okay, and that is what the foreign trade multiplier is. If you guys remember, basically recall, Keynesian multiplier was nothing but 1 by MPS, basically 1 by the leakages. So in the Keynesian closed economy system, the MPS is the only leakages. But here, once we make it an open economy, then there's another dimension of leakages that is added to that is basically import. So we have now 1 by MPS plus MPM. Okay. So the equilibrium of national income, if you guys recall, was initially 1,000 rupees, right? And now we have a rise in export by 200 rupees. So it's X like increases from like 300 to 500, and then we have like 200 rupees increase in export. Okay, and so we have like Keynesian multiplier. This foreign trade multiplier is 1 by MPS plus MPM. And if we assume that MPS is equal to 0.25, okay, out of every 100 rupees you save 25 rupees, and MPM basically marginal propensity to import, which is 0.15, that means out of every 100 rupees you spend 15 rupees on import. Okay, so both are leakages, you are adding them together, what you get is 1 by 0.40, and which gives us a total number of 2.5. So basically what we see is change in income now is due to change in export into the foreign trade multiplier. Okay, so if you remember, our change in export was 200 into 2.5, basically 500. So now new equilibrium income is initial equilibrium YE plus change in income. Initial equilibrium income was 1,000 rupees, and then you have 500 rupees added to that. So 1,500 is the new equilibrium income, and this is what you get. Now see, the 1,500 is the new equilibrium income, which we denote as YE dash. Okay, so now we have another question added to this, which is basically we are now looking at what is the changes in the equilibrium income. So if you guys recall, till now we are looking at foreign trade multiplier as like how does like an income of a nation expand when you have a like increase in export. Okay, so here what we see is a virtuous cycle in operation, right? A country managed to increase its export, then that means some certain section of a population within a nation earns some income, then they spend those money, and then their spending becomes other people's income, and then this virtuous cycle keeps going on. Okay, but now the question that we have is the other way around. What if the people in our country basically spend their money on other countries' goods and services? That means import. Okay, that means now we are like the money basically is going to someone else, not to people producing goods and services within the domestic economy. So then basically it's kind of a leakage. What will be the effect of that kind of leakage on an equilibrium income? Okay, so here basically we have this cycle operating. It's not a virtuous cycle, it's a kind of a vicious cycle, and then we have a reduced national income than before. Okay, and this can be simplified through this diagram. Okay, we are now for simplicity saving and doing away with investment. Okay, we are just simply bringing export and import in the picture, and just to show what happens if there's an increase in import in an economy. Okay, in the x-axis we are measuring income, in the y-axis we are measuring export and import, right? And then we have this export again the parallel line to the national income. And what does it mean? So it means that basically export is independent of our income. Just because we have a higher income doesn't mean that we will export more, because export is something, it's a call taken by residents of other country. Okay, and if their income increases, not ours, only then they will increase and export. Okay, they will buy from our country, and that's why it's independent of our national income, and that's why we have a parallel line. Okay, and then we have like import function, which is, as you can see, is upward sloping. As our income increases, we are basically buying more goods and services. Okay, because if you guys recall, m is equal to function of income. Okay, so as we spend at a constant proportion of our income, so it might be say 0.15. That means out of 100 rupees, we spend 15 rupees on buying goods and service from other countries. So as our income increases, we keep purchasing more goods in the same proportion. Okay, and that's why it is an upward sloping curve. Okay, but now what if our import propensity increases? That means 15 rupees out of 100 rupees that we spend on goods and services from other countries, we spend probably, let us say, 30 rupees. So just to give an example, said we are now exposed to advertisement in TV, and then we started liking a lot of foreign goods. Say like instead of buying say Tata Motors, you are like preferring to buy Kia Motors. Okay, Kia is a foreign company, so you are buying goods and services from other countries, or maybe you have started buying basically iPhone. So, but then your income is not rising. Against the same level of income you are buying, you are spending more money on the purchase of goods and services from the other country. So that's why basically there's a rise in the import propensity, and this M in that's the line showing the import is shifting up now. Okay, shifting to the left. Against every 100 rupees, we are spending more on goods and services from other countries. So what I am saying is that we have now rise in import intensity, meaning that against the same 100 against same 100 rupees, we are spending probably 30 rupees instead of 15 rupees on purchase of goods and services. So that's why we are showing it like this import curve, showing the import propensity curve basically shifting up, and now it is intersecting the export curve at E2. Earlier it was E1, right? And now you can see that the equilibrium income is also getting reduced to Y2. So what I am showing is basically diagrammatic representation of what I am saying. But then if you want to know exactly how this operates in reality, basically once you started deciding, no, I will spend on purchase of foreign goods, basically that money would have probably gone to a domestic farm, but now you are basically spending that money on goods and services produced by some foreign farms in another country. So that means now that is displacing the domestic production. Okay, and then basically, and those industries are probably now producing less units, so then they probably won't need that many people, so some people will lose job, their income is getting reduced, and so it operates in a reverse order, and to basically the decline in the total national income. Yeah, so with basically to sum up, I would like to say that this foreign trade multiplier operates in the same way as the Keynesian multiplier, just that we are basically, if you remember the Keynesian multiplier, if government spend 100 rupees, then it operates in a virtuous cycle, right? Some people receive additional income, and then they will spend that money in purchasing goods and services that they need. Okay, but then if they save a higher share of those money that they receive from the government, then total income won't increase to the extent that we want, then ideal way. Okay, because if they set aside some money, then that's a leakage. If government basically withdraws some money, or government cut down certain expenditure, then basically then some people will be losing their income, and then their spending also will go away, and then it operates in an opposite way. So then total income will be reduced. Okay, so but then how much changes in income we get to see, plus or minus both way, depends on the strength of the leakages. Okay, if the leakage is very strong, that is a high proportion of money is saved aside out of income that is created, then probably there will be less income created, and in opposite way, less income will be basically reduced. Okay, but if leakage is very strong, so then you have more income created, and it also operates in the opposite way. But now we just simply expand that concept, and then we bring the marginal propensity to import. So basically, instead of 1 by MPS, we have now 1 by MPS plus MPM, and then the remaining concept is the same as before. Okay, so I think this makes the whole concept clear, right? So thank you.